very much, Uncle. Okay, thank you. Indeed, it's a real honor and pleasure for me to be standing up here in front of you all. All protocols observed. If I can have the slides on the screen, please. So speaking as an African scientist and conservationist, as the best chair as well for that role, the first African chair, about African solutions for nature and people. Now, I don't have much time, so I will run through quite quickly some of my slides. And I'll make a bit of a disclaimer, because what I hope to do is to really present some big picture, integrative observations. Not to get into detail of individual conservation context that many of you are facing, but I hope that you can really see what you do in the picture that I painted over here. I'll have a very strong focus on equity, and equity for all, and acknowledging, of course, the inclusive of indigenous peoples and local communities who are present here in the room. And so please see your context in this narrative, and I'll go through a brief introduction and then walk you through some of the African challenges and opportunities in conservation, sustainability, inequality in finance, and then perhaps how we can move forward through IUCN's new plans for the coming work program and vision coming up ahead. So, sustainable development. I'm a great fan of the Sustainable Development Goals, but when you put them in a circle, like I've done up above, and look at a local place to try and see how does sustainability work in a given context, rather than looking at the intergovernmental space. And when you look at the local context, such as this coastal fishing community, which is what I work in on the coast of East Africa, you could look at the individual stories of people. So in this case, this wonderful graphic from an online illustrated journal shows a couple in the fishing community, Hamisi and Mariam, who of course fish and sell the fish in markets. Their income depends on the health of the reef. There's community conservation areas that are also shared by other interest groups, tourist operators and so on. And the important thing in this space is how these benefits from nature might be shared amongst the community. And so you can look at the goals in each of these pieces of the story across all the 17 goals of very natural language. Now, in IFES, what we do is we put together these large, very complex assessment reports, and I'm not going to go into detail on those, but in order to do that, and 3 that are upcoming, at the end of this year, 2 at the end of this year, 1 at the end of next year, very pertinent to the discussions that we're having. But in order to organize this work, we have 2 framings that are very important for us in moving forward. So one is a conceptual framework, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail on the next slide, as well as the concept of nature's contributions to people or ecosystem services. Now, in terms of the conceptual framework, what we did was we ran a 2-year process with a lot of scientists, really looking at how nature, as a foundation, provides contributions to people that support a good quality of life and societal benefits, and then the various indirect and direct drivers in that interaction web. But it's a very inaccessible framework for many non-scientists, and so I've been thinking as a chair, how do we really interpret this more, communicate about it, and thinking about nature, economy. That's basically how we use benefits from nature. We commodify, we extract, and then we sell in our markets. Societal benefits we get from those, and then the various direct drivers that cascade down. And looking at it this way, the Sustainable Development Model, this provides a much more practical view on daily life from the conceptual framework, in terms of trying to understand actions on nature, which is what we are all concerned about, but also the linked actions on economy and on society that we need to do to make that conservation work. And in doing this, we can relate all of this to the global policy frameworks, but we can focus on the tangible actions on the ground and in our work, rather than worrying about these large targets and so on that many others can look at in terms of reporting and so on. So 2 framing, then nature's contributions to people, this particular box coming out of nature to economy. This is important because this is where the impacts on nature come from. And if we're hoping to sustain nature, rebuild nature into the future, we really need to understand how do we manage these, our extraction and what we take out from nature, We identified in the global assessment in 2019 18 contributions. This is a table, and they go from number 1 is habitat creation and maintenance, all the way down to number 18 is maintenance of options into the future. You can see from this table, what we try to do is to show in the columns that most of these are declining, all those arrows pointing down in the red column on the left, but some are increasing. And of course, if you look at those closely, what we realize is that the reason that those are increasing is because those are the ones that we commodify, and we extract, and we maximize. So energy, food, materials from nature. And in maximizing their extraction, we're of course driving the decline of all of the other contributions out of nature itself. Number 4, regulation of climate output there, carbon sequestration, that's the next one. We're commodifying now. Of course, the risk is that we do it the same way, we'll just drive the others down as well. And the importance of that model, sorry if we go back a step, is that if we understand all of these 18 contributions from nature in trying to optimize our utilization of those we're interested in, we must make sure we're not undermining the production of the others and undermining the health of nature in the process. 2 slides on the urgency of action, why we need to act quickly and now. So one, looking at global population and economy. We've had debates over 5 decades now about global population impacts on the planet. This graph shows growth in global wealth, global population from 1970 to 2020 on the right. You can see that global population has indeed doubled in that time. But global wealth, or the economy, has gone up 25 times in that time. So here the message is that, is it global population or our economic activities and growth in wealth that are really the problem driving the declines in nature? We understand this very well now through planetary boundaries work, the rate of acceleration, showing all of these indicators shooting up through the roof related to economic activity. Population can be a problem, and we need to watch out for this. Africa's population is not having an impact at the global level now, but we do know that locally overpopulation does degrade ecosystems, does over-extract resources, and as Africa's population grows, it will grow to have global significance, but also because of economic growth, which we need to have to bring people out of poverty. Of course, that impact will become more important globally in the future. And then climate change. We know this is a big challenge. I've chosen to illustrate it using this graphic, which shows the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions of countries from pre-industrial times up until last year. It's the total amount of carbon dioxide that has been emitted that is important rather than the year-to-year amount. You can see that certain countries have much larger footprints than others. Africa's contribution has been just 3% of that total. So a very small amount. So the worrying figure is that there's only 5 years to go to consume the remaining carbon dioxide budget that we have to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. I'll come back to this graph a little bit later. And this graph of global average temperature increasing. This one is designed to show that it's still going up very rapidly, that we reached about 1.27 degrees warming last year. We're projected to cross 1.5 degrees warming within 10 years, but that's on the 20-year average. We've already almost hit that last year, and we're very lucky to hit 1.5 degrees in the coming years. And so this is a real crisis that we need to face, not just for ecosystems, but of course for people and economies as well. So, moving into some of our challenges and opportunities, starting with some conservation ones. Now, Africa's richness in biodiversity system services is well known. This graphic in the middle is from the First Regional Assessment, produced in 2018. And then the indicators of IUCN is so well known for the IUCN registered species and registered ecosystems, showing worrying amounts of orange and red, and that of course is increasing. Now what we are very well focused on and a lot of focal activity in the conservation community is focused on protected areas. I won't go through this slide because I think it's mostly me, I don't have so much time. But the problem is that even in protected areas, we're not necessarily able to slow or reverse the decline of nature. This is a very nice integrated study. I'll just use this as an illustration showing several parts of Africa. Within protected areas in orange, bird populations are declining, but they're declining faster outside of those protected areas. And the reason is because of all the different challenges that we're working on, and I hope many of you see the areas we're working on in that list. So of course we see things like climate change, human-wildlife conflict, infrastructure development, and so on. And for the bird examples, specific, the manifestation of these challenges in relation to the decline of bird populations summarized by this study. Now, what this really points towards is the need to look outside of protected areas, of course. There are many projects are doing that, and people focused on this. But as we progress towards a fully crowded planet on land and in the sea in terms of our activities, we really need to look at protection and conservation across 100% of space. And this is the importance of spatial planning on land and in the sea, that we really plan at 100% levels across all spaces of what's happening within our landscapes. This illustration is from the IPCC Index Workshop Report in 2021, pointing out these sort of three different types of areas, which I'll come back to. Sort of the blue circles outline sort of natural spaces, the remote wilderness areas that are mostly intact. In yellow is shared spaces, where there is agriculture, there's pastoralism, there's production, fisheries, and so on. Moderate human densities as well, but in tune with nature and managing the regenerative capacities of nature effectively. And then in red, the intensive agricultural zones and urban zones where nature is not recognizable anymore, the original biomes. And so the question here is what proportion needs to be intact, supporting global values of nature at planetary levels, versus well-functioning. And this is places that support services with a people lens, thinking about people living on landscapes and in seascapes, how do people survive and make their livelihoods and so on. So this is the framing that the Earth Commission, a group that I've been working with recently, working on planetary scale boundaries, has been looking at a safe and just operating space in relation to key planetary systems, or Earth systems. I've been focused on the biodiversity one because that's the area that I work in, but also for that biodiversity boundary, my main interest has been, so there are two of these. There's a boundary looking at intact ecosystems and a boundary looking at altered ecosystems and their ability to support people. Now, the ecosystem intactness is the variable that we use to look at intact ecosystems, and I'll put the text up on the screen. But I'm more interested in discussing, in terms of solutions for nature and people, how do we really resolve the challenges that undermine people's livelihoods and undermine conservation across most landscapes and seascapes that we work with, and undermine the intact areas as well if they become too degraded. So this really uses the term functional integrity. This is because we're looking at the ecosystem integrity and the ability to provide functions, to provide nature's contributions to people. And we did a study looking at a range of NCPs on the right there, so things like pollination or erosion control and things like that. And the key thing there is that nature needs to be present in local spaces for these benefits to be accessible to people. One, because, for example, vegetation protects the soil if it's right there on site, but also it has to be within the space of people to access those benefits. And so this applies a justice lens as well. We are very focused on not just the safe part, but the just part of this equation. And we found we decided to look at square kilometer scale because this corresponds to the activity space of most people, many people. And if you have 20 to 25% high function, well functioning, or semi-natural vegetation or habitat on land in every square kilometre, you can provide most ecosystem services to people. The problem is currently of the altered landscapes on the planet, which is about half the land area on the planet, or 30% of that area meets this criterion, 70% is below. So people are not being adequately supported by nature in those spaces. So this provides ways to move forward with planning, conservation, sustainability activities across landscapes. We know this well from the global biodiversity discussions in the last few years. In intact ecosystems and spaces, we already have a limited loss, so we really need to ensure no further loss of intact ecosystems. But within altered or degraded spaces, to look at this sort of local approach to planning. So protect and restore a minimum 20 to 25% nature in every square kilometre, and what that nature will be will vary with the local context. The focus of the local scale and jurisdictions enables you to put decision making in the hands of local governments or the people, community representatives. And I'm getting a very hard warning on time now, so I'll leave ahead of this because I think I'll have to make this accessible to you separately, as I wouldn't be able to go through many of these slides. I think if I can just jump ahead to some of the concluding slides, I would like to focus on this one because this really expresses the challenge of carbon inequality, because the issue of equity is a very important one for us to focus on moving forward. This image from the Carbon Inequality Report shows the responsibility of carbon emissions to different components of the global population at these income levels. And when you split it out, it makes it very clear that the top 10% of the global population is responsible for half of the carbon emissions. But the most vulnerable people, the next slide, are those with poverty. So we really need to take actions, including in how we do conservation, to redistribute both wealth and risk in terms of future challenges coming up. And the important thing about a lot of the conservation work we need to plan, the conservation work really helps to not just sustain biodiversity, but also ensure people's needs are being met across different spaces. I think I'll try and jump forward to pass the slide on finance. This slide really helps just tries to indicate that the finance cannot come just from direct financing for biodiversity. It needs to come from really refiguring the global financial system so that that big red hole of nature negative finance is transformed into nature positive approaches. It takes the concept that we have extracted a lot of value out of nature into finance, and we see that accumulation. That value hasn't disappeared. We need to transform it back from finance into natural systems across the planet. And I'll just jump a few steps ahead. In terms of understanding where we need to get to, this slide really emphasizes some of the actions that need to take to get to nature and people's solutions. What we have focused on in the biodiversity community, certainly from the science side, is really trying to just, trying to understand how effective can we be. Right now, 2024, we're between that yellow and grey curve over there, and we need not just the most effective biodiversity conservation activities we can have in terms of improving the state of nature, but we need to have priority attention to direct and indirect drivers of decline and address justice and equity to get to a net positive solution in the future. And this part above is we need to be very realistic, because if we're trying to get governments, communities to really commit to the difficult actions that take 10, 20, 50 years to come to pass, we need to be very realistic about what the final goal might be. And then I think I'll finish with this last slide, some takeaway messages. The three main ones to think about in the days moving forward, and thinking about how to apply this in the 20-year strategy, thinking about the next work program from an African perspective. The three main points, or some sub-points: ramp up ambition on all the integrated actions. We must consolidate the gains we've already made. We must really make sure we don't lose what we have gained so far, but we need a lot more. It's time for equity finally to focus on meeting people's needs, and then this concept of returning finance into nature. It's not new finance that we're asking for from different places, it's taking over-extracted finance back into natural capital, because that is what really supports the economy and society. So I think I'll have to stop with that. My apologies, and I'll be happy to talk about any details.
Thank you, my son. Ladies and gentlemen, I must make some announcements. Let me just go to the podium if I may. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Let me just go to the podium if I may. Stop is for